The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
A very good day to you with the news at this time. I am Tiana Jordan. To begin the news, here's a look at the lead stories. The Health Ministry says the younger group are showing low rates of vaccination, especially out of school youths. A 102-year-old female from Region 4, Demerara Mahaica, is among 6 persons who succumbed to COVID-19 in the last 34 hours. Providence East Bank Demerara has been identified to be the home of a Hyatt-branded 4-star hotel in Guyana. Regionally, a Trinidad and Tobago businessman was rescued by police after more than 3 weeks being kidnapped. And in international news, countries are being urged to strengthen their carbon-cutting targets by the end of 2022 in a draft agreement published at the COP26 Glasgow Climate Summit. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
Not seeing returns on your dollar? Then advertise with News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM and see results. We give you competitive rates, wide coverage, appealing programs, streaming online worldwide on them waves, and we give you value for your money. You'll see returns when you advertise with us. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 for those competitive rates. 103.1 FM, accurate information blended with great music.
And now the news in detail. The Health Ministry says the younger group are low rates of vaccination, especially out of school youths. The Health Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, during his Wednesday COVID update, says his ministry has work still in 2 age categories.
The group that we are worried about, where we've seen relatively low uptake, would be the 18 to 40 age group. That's something because the numbers are relatively low in that age group. And also, while we have made the vaccines available for 12 to 17, that age group, we have opened up to this age group giving the Pfizer vaccine. The uptake there has been relatively slow.
The Health Minister says the out-of-school youths are posing a challenge.
I think we have been able to go out to the schools, get a lot of the children who are of that age who are attending school, but the out-of-school youth, I think we have been struggling to get them to get their vaccines. And so I think one of the things that we have to do is to get parents more involved, or guardians more involved, so that these young people can come and get their vaccines.
Minister Anthony says Region 4, Demerara Mahaica, has shown signs of beating the virus since a substantial number of persons in the region are vaccinated. He, however, cautioned that some other regions are improving, but Region 10, Region 3, and Region 3 needs to improve. The Health Ministry says Region 3, Essequibo Islands, West Demerara, has the highest number of COVID cases, while Linden in Region 10 is a growing concern. The Health Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, says there is an overall decline in positive cases, but not so for the West Demerara region, which now has more cases than Region 4.
When we look at the regional distribution of these cases, we now see that Region 3 is the area that has the highest amount of cases. So we now have 1,100 cases in Region 3. And there's been that drop in Region 4, so we are below 1,000 in Region 4. We are now at 934 cases in Region 4.
The health minister says most areas in Region 3 are infected with high numbers, with Tushin leading. Dr. Anthony says the health ministry is especially concerned about the growing numbers in Linden, which has the lowest number of vaccinated persons of all the 10 regions.
But I think where we're very much concerned would be in Wisma, where we have now 72 cases that are active and 33 in Amila's ward and 19 in Mackenzie. But why we have to be very concerned here is because most of the population in Linden and in Region 10 as a whole, the vaccination uptake there has been quite low. So if you have cases, those cases can easily spread to others. And therefore you would see more people getting infected.
Minister Anthony urges that persons don't become complacent but continue to observe the COVID-19 protocols and get vaccinated to further reduce the numbers. Canada's High Commissioner to Guyana, Mr. Mark Berman, has told members of the Guyana Police Force that the scourge of gender-based violence must not appear to be normalized. Canada's High Commissioner was delivering feature remarks at the Murundoy-sponsored gender-based violence training at the Police Training Centre, Ivlery. Mr. Berman implored the ranks to not allow the scourge to become normal.
Law enforcement capacity building is a key pillar in this fight, and it's a pleasure to partner and to be here this morning. You are one of the front-line defense for victims and their families. Too often violence against women and girls is normalized and goes unpunished. That can't be allowed to happen. We are all here today because we know about the high rates of sexual and gender-based violence. An estimated 1 in 3 women, we've heard higher, globally experience physical or sexual abuse in her lifetime, most often by an intimate partner.
The High Commissioner presents grim statistics to show the extent of suffering which is compounded by the COVID pandemic globally and highlights the need for teamwork to end the societal scourge.
Around 120 million girls worldwide have experienced forced intercourse or other forced sexual acts during their lives. And the COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated gender-based violence. It is inflicting devastating familial effects, and its impacts are reverberating well beyond the immediate family. It has a profound impact on the economic, public health, security, and social sectors. It is therefore imperative that as partners, we continue to work with the governments and non-governmental organizations such as Murundoy to help eliminate and mitigate the scourge of violence and threats of violence against all.
The training was facilitated by Murundoy through a grant from Canada to train ranks from the Guyana Police Force on how to treat cases of gender-based violence. The Ministry of Human Services and Social Security also participated in the training and has a parallel training, COP 2000, aimed at training 2,000 ranks across Guyana to handle domestic violence cases. A 102-year-old female from Region 4, Damarar, Mahaika, is among 6 persons who succumbed to COVID-19 in the last 34 hours. The death toll is now 951. The Health Ministry says 48 new cases of the virus were also recorded during the same period. There are 17 persons severely sick in the COVID-19 ICU and 47 others hospitalized. The ministry says the number of persons told to isolate themselves at home decreased to 2,284. The ministry says 253,938 adults are fully vaccinated and 387,505 are partially vaccinated. For children ages 12 to 17 years old, 19,028 are fully vaccinated and 27,954 partially vaccinated. A Hyatt-branded hotel is to be built in Guyana at Providence on the east bank of Demerara. A statement by the proprietor said the $32 million edifice will be a 4-star hotel with 125 rooms targeting middle and upper-class clienteles. Amenities include different guest rooms options, disability-outfitted rooms, restaurant and bar, meeting rooms, social lounge, fitness center, pools, internet and communication links, room service, guest laundry, spacious and parking spaces. The project is owned and developed by SIR Investments Guyana Inc., a subsidiary of Universal Investments Limited, a company registered in Trinidad and Tobago. The Hyatt-branded hotel is expected to complete construction and open for business in 36 months from the start of construction. During the construction phase, some 300 persons are to be employed and 80 permanent jobs and several part-time jobs will be available upon opening. The sod turning will be done today at the Providence location. And now in regional news. Achaguana's businessman Kartike Ramsudar was rescued by officers of the Anti-Kidnapping Unit, Special Operations Response Team and Interagency Task Force yesterday after being abducted on October 13th. Police say no ransom was paid. According to a Loop News report, investigators have since detained 2 suspects in connection with the kidnapping. A police operation in the Central and Southwestern Divisions yesterday led to Ramsudar being found. He was taken to a medical facility where he was medically examined and subsequently reunited with his family. Ramsudar, who owns a business in Felicity, was at his business place at 2:40 p.m. on October 13th when he was allegedly accosted by 3 men, one armed with a firearm. The men abducted him and forced him into a dark-colored Honda Civic. Ramsudar was then taken away. The vehicle was later found burnt out along Bernard Road, Felicity. Investigations are ongoing. Prime Minister Philip Davis is promising that justice will be served in the death of a 4-year-old child over the last weekend and called on Bahamians to ensure that no other child suffers the same fate. Loop News reports that PM Davis was quoted as saying that the thought of any child being harmed is deeply distressing and is certain that many Bahamians feel the same way. PM Davis says the circumstances being reported stirs up the most profound feelings of disbelief, revulsion, and profound sadness as he addressed an event at the National Training Agency. Several organizations, including Rise Bahamas and the Bahamas Crisis Center, say the death of the child sheds light on the inadequate preventative measures and laws for child protection in the Bahamas. Police say that 2 people are assisting with investigations into the death of the child, who was brought to the Princess Margaret Hospital over the weekend with severe injuries to her body. In a statement, the organizations, which also included families of all murder victims, Organization for Responsible Government, Silent No More, and Smart and Strong Sisterhood say they were saddened at the brutal assault that led to the death of the child. The Prime Minister says his commitment has been given to the family to ensure that children are not harmed in such brutal ways again and assures the family of justice. The Office of the First Lady issued a statement committing the Office of the Spouse of the Prime Minister to work closely with the government, local NGOs and CARICOM counterparts to bring sustained public awareness in addition to policy and legislative proposals designed to offer greater protection to children and the most vulnerable in communities. Franz de Vreites, the United Progressive Party UPP candidate for St. John's City, South Antigua and Barbuda, is expressing concern about voter fraud in the upcoming general elections. According to the Antigua newsroom, de Vreites says there have been reports of voter stalking in the constituency where Stedroy Benjamin is the incumbent Antigua Labour Party ALP representative. According to the UPP candidate, persons are encouraged to contact him and report any evidence of the vote stalking activity. De Vreites says his team has canvassed St. John's City South and has discovered some inconsistencies being facilitated by landlords. The UPP representative says he is hoping to challenge any illegality in the courts to prevent voter fraud. Further, de Vreites says he has been made aware of instances in previous elections in which persons voted by assuming the identities of dead people. Elections are constitutionally due in Antigua and Barbuda in 2023, but Prime Minister Gaston Brown has hinted there will be early polls once again. The World Bank, in a new report, says that if countries in the Caribbean are to improve their resilience against shocks from severe weather to a pandemic, the region's governments have to find a way to strengthen their efficiency. The report, entitled 360 Degrees Resilience, a guide to prepare the Caribbean for a new generation of shocks, also recommended that households and businesses be empowered and called for an improvement in spatial planning and natural coastal protection. The details of the flagship report were revealed on Tuesday by World Bank senior economist Julie Rosenberg in a webinar. The Barbados Today says the report, which covers 17 Caribbean countries, argues that a more comprehensive approach to resilience can help tackle the challenges posed by climate change, new diseases, and changing socio-economic contexts. Rosenberg says while countries in the region had shown high levels of resilience thus far, much more was still needed. She says Caribbean countries have built relatively high levels of resilience so far, but the levels of resilience have not always been inclusive, which means that some populations, in particular the poorest populations, have been left behind and have suffered disproportionately from disasters. Rosenberg says the report outlined ways in which countries in the Caribbean could bolster their resilience, noting the effectiveness of governments is a big factor. She says governments must empower households and the private sector by increasing both the coverage and adequacy of social protection, strengthening workers' skills for resilience, improving access to finance, and making good quality risk data available to the public is also necessary. Rosenberg says there was a need to reduce future physical risk by investing in critical infrastructure, better enforcing building codes and standards, systematically considering emerging and changing risks, and planning to build back aftershocks were also key. We turn now to the BBC World Service for international news.
This is the BBC News with Fiona MacDonald. The UN says world leaders meeting at the climate summit in Glasgow must make meaningful and measurable cuts to carbon emissions to provide any chance of limiting a catastrophic rise in global temperatures. In the first draft of a potential agreement, the UN called for the phasing out of fossil fuel subsidies and the use of coal. Rebecca Morell has more details.
Significantly, this attempt to keep this 1.5 degree threshold on the table, that's there in this document, but we know already that what's being pledged by countries really isn't enough. I mean, we need to cut emissions by 45% by 2030. At the moment, if you add up all the pledges, emissions go up by 14% by 2030. So there's a real yawning gap between what's being promised and where we're likely to end up. So there's a lot of work to do.
A court in Thailand has ruled that calls for reform of the monarchy's role in politics made at a demonstration last year were unconstitutional. It accused 3 of the protest leaders of trying to overthrow the current system. More from Jonathan Head.
This is very serious. It means, in effect, the court, which is famous for making controversial, very conservative rulings, is saying you simply cannot discuss the monarchy at all without risk of falling foul of the Constitution, and also calling for the overthrow of the system, which is their interpretation of it, is actually a charge called treason here, and treason carries the death penalty. So although the court's ruling doesn't carry any penalties, it typically opens the possibility that these 3 top protest leaders may now be charged with treason and face the highest penalty.
One of Germany's most prominent virologists says another 100,000 people in the country could die from COVID. Christian Drosten issued his warning as Germany continued to register record rates of infection and death. Jenny Hill reports.
Alarm bells have been ringing for days now as case numbers soar. Nearly 40,000 new infections were reported in the last 24 hours, a record high for Germany. Hospitals in some parts of the country report that they're getting close to capacity. And today, one of Germany's most well-known virologists issued a grim warning. Christian Drosten said that if nothing was done to mitigate the 4th wave, a further 100,000 people could die. Germany's health minister has blamed those who are not yet vaccinated for the current surge in cases. 16 million people over the age of 12 aren't immunised.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has told President Putin of Russia to stop what she called the inhumane exploitation of the migrant crisis on the border between Poland and Belarus. Thousands of people have massed in the area in freezing conditions in the hope of crossing into Poland and the EU. Belarus is accused of orchestrating the chaos with Moscow's backing. World News from the BBC. The former president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, who's on hunger strike in prison, has been denied the right to attend his own trial. The authorities said they took the decision because they believe the opposition, which has called for Mr Saakashvili's release, would try to block roads when he was moved to court in the capital Tbilisi. The former president is accused of violently dispersing anti-government protests in 2007. A Norwegian relief agency says 4,000 to 5,000 Afghans a day have been crossing into Iran since the Taliban took control of Kabul in August. The Norwegian Refugee Council estimates hundreds of thousands more are expected during Afghanistan's harsh winter months. The head of the council, Jan Egeland, urged the world to do more to help.
But the refugees who come here now to Iran, 5,000 per day now, are of course exhausted, and they have nothing when they come to the country. And they come to a place where there are 3.5, 4 million Afghans already. Iran cannot be, expected to shoulder the responsibility for millions. There has to be a responsibility sharing. There has to be investment and hope.
A top French female footballer has been arrested by police after one of her teammates was attacked with an iron bar by 2 men. The authorities confirmed that Aminata Diallo, who plays for Paris Saint-Germain, was being questioned following the incident last Thursday, in which another player, Khaira Hamraoui, was injured. A Hindu who converted to Christianity in the 18th century is to become the first Indian layman to be made a saint. Officials from the Roman Catholic Church confirmed that Devashayam Pillai will be canonised at a special Mass at the Vatican next May. Known as Blessed Lazarus, he was beatified in 2012, the 300th anniversary of his birth. BBC News.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. The Health Ministry says the younger group are showing low rates of vaccination, especially out-of-school youths. A 102-year-old female from Region 4, Demerara Mahaika, is among 6 persons who succumbed to COVID-19 in the last 34 hours. Providence East Bank Demerara has been identified to be the home of a Hyatt-branded 4-star hotel in Guyana. The World Bank, in a new report, says that if Caribbean countries are to improve their resilience against shocks from severe weather to a pandemic, the region's governments have to find a way to strengthen their efficiency. In international news, countries are being urged to strengthen their carbon-cutting targets by the end of 2022 in a draft agreement published at the COP26 Glasgow Climate Summit. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the Newstalk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.